I'm a little rusty, so sue me. I'm also considerably emotional at the moment, so I'm not even using OBS for this. I've got the guardrails on and I'm using StreamYard. The last 36 hours have been quite a bit of a whirlwind. I've had to have conversations with my daughter that no parent should ever have to have, let alone with a 6-year-old. And I've since come to find out that everything that's known about the current situation has been known by police since at least the 12th of May, and they've only just advised parents of exactly what happened yesterday. What's worse is they only notified the parents of the 8 kids that were able to be identified from the images last week. For those of you that don't know, little lady Overlaw'd was in daycare pretty much from the day she was 9 months old. That was a combination of health issues with myself and Lady Overlaw'd, and then the fact that I was working my ass off with my law firm and Lady Overlaw'd was working in the city, and we wanted her to be able to socialize with other kids, which we just didn't really feel like we were able to do on our own. And all this has led is to me coming to the conclusion that I failed as a parent. And realizing that there are depths at the bottom of my stomach that no man should ever have to tread. A 26-year-old, not that it matters, gay male childcare worker was arrested yesterday. No, sorry, he was arrested on the 12th of May, but it became public knowledge yesterday for committing offences against 8 children at my daughter's daycare. Now, I'll be very clear. Those are the 8 that, in my understanding and my opinion, we know about, and that they were able to identify from the material that they found on his phone. A further 1,200 children are having to be tested for sexually transmitted infections. And you know what? Fuck it. They haven't really been broadcasting that. I have to check my 6-year-old as to whether or not she has gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia. Because one of the charges that he has is supposedly recklessly spreading genetic material. Now, that could mean any number of things. That could mean that he spat in the sunscreen and that it was used, it was spread on the kids. It could mean that other genetic material was spread around the center. I don't know. I don't care. I'm not making any defamatory allegations. I don't care at this point. I'm a parent that's hurting because I managed to put my little girl in harm's way by trusting somebody else. So, and because they don't know what else happened, it's only those 8 families that were contacted in advance. Lady Overlaw'd and I found out via text message and then an email from the Department of Health weeks after the fact. And it's only just hit the news. It is now officially international news because it got picked up by the Washington Post and the BBC. 70 charges so far. And Vic police are saying that the investigation is ongoing. And you know what? I know that there's going to be people out there that call me a hypocrite because on the channel I've always said, innocent until proven guilty. Shouldn't have his name out there, all that sort of shit. You know what? Admittedly, yeah, fine, I'll be a hypocrite. I am a little too close to home on this one. But as far as I'm concerned, if there's already documentary evidence, although I legally have to say that he allegedly committed these crimes, I don't feel bad in the fucking slightest. So yes, yesterday after spending multiple hours on hold because of the 2,600 families, I should specify, they had to notify 2,600 families, of which they've recommended 1,200 of them get their kids tested for STIs. And they had, I don't know, 50 people answering the phones. And I'm not blaming the poor bastards in the call centers, because when I called up and explained who I was, we basically went in a priority queue because she was at the center where all of this allegedly occurred. He was one of her favorite childcare workers. We were going to ask him to babysit at various times. So anyway, that's been the last 24 hours. And obviously I've taken time off work. She's home. Thank God for that. But I mean, those either watching have known that I haven't been streaming recently, but this fucking broke me. And Lady Overlaw'd said no. Because I said to her, would people think that this is, if this is the wrong thing for me to do, to be putting this information out there? And she said, no, as a parent in this situation, I want you to do this. And I was like, fine, I'm happy to. Because it does kind of feel like certain information's being buried. And certainly, for certain parents out there, they are not providing a certain level of information either. So let's find out about. I'm just going to have a look at what the news is actually saying, because I haven't looked at anything in the last 18 hours. But oh, Squid, no, I'm sorry. I turned off monetization on this. There aren't going to be any ads because, frankly, I'm going to be playing news clips in full, and I don't care if I get copyright claim for this. I don't, in the slightest. But thank you very much for the super chat. In a rising amount of sickos infiltrating public schools and daycares, it's not possible to know who they are until they get caught. That's the problem for me. There's been multiple sources that have said, oh, he was unknown to police. And now I'm hearing today, he was known to police. And just... I want to know the details. Because I want to know exactly how I can spend the rest of eternity. Because I know where I'm going, and I'm happy to make myself go there if it means I can spend the rest of eternity punishing this fucker. And I have no qualms about that whatsoever. But anyway, let's have a look at what I had to watch. And say what you will, Scarlett, she's 6 now. Lady Overlaw'd and I were very careful. We were tiptoeing around what we were going to say. We were horrified about how we were going to have this conversation with her. She handled it like an absolute champ until she realised she had to have a needle. I was just going to say to her, okay, we've got to go and have a blood test. It's so we can test whether or not you've got superpowers or not. Because I didn't want to have to come anywhere close to telling her the truth. But the conversation sort of just unraveled, and we spoke to her about it, and what I've come to realise is my daughter may be significantly more mature than I am. Here's the news from last night. Because this, like, when I left yesterday, I was an emotional wreck, because when I left work, my wife had called me. We'd spoken to Vera. She had called the advice line, but didn't yet have the details. She forwarded me the email because she didn't understand it. She didn't understand what the contents of the email was, what it was saying, all that sort of stuff, or the fact that they were recommending our daughter be tested for sexually transmitted diseases because someone had potentially assaulted her. I broke, and I'm in no way ashamed to say that. I broke. But this video is how the majority of Victoria found out. And when I called and spoke to my boss earlier today, he's like, it's all over the news. You take as much time as you need. And I'm just like...
For infectious diseases. Good evening. More than 1,000 tiny Victorians will be tested for infectious diseases from possible contact with a Point Cook childcare worker who's been charged with 70 counts of child abuse.
Police have so far identified 8 alleged victims, some as young as 5 months old, as families linked to 20 Melbourne centres where Joshua Brown worked reel from these shocking allegations. Heidi Murphy begins our coverage.
This is the childcare worker accused of crimes that have sickened the community.
It will haunt me forever. That did something happen to my child?
Really scary.
And that's the bit that I'm going to be having to wrap my head around. She was so young, she said she doesn't remember anything. Thank God for that. But at the moment, he's only been charged in relation to the kids that they can identify in the material that they found on his electronics. We might never actually know.
Look after your children, and this is what's happened.
As a parent too, I can only imagine the unbearable grief and...
No, you can fuck right off, Jacinta. I have no idea, like, I get why you commented, but I don't care that you're commenting on this. Because as far as I'm concerned, if the government weren't taxing us through the nose and causing so many fucking other problems with housing crises, with cost of living crisis, which you are a part of, either I or Lady Overlaw'd would have been able to be working from home, and she wouldn't have had to have been in daycare or in this situation. So yeah, I do lay a little bit of blame at your feet too.
pain the affected families are experiencing right now.
Joshua Dale Brown worked at 20 different childcare centres across Melbourne in recent years. The 26-year-old Point Cook man arrested on May 12 after police discovered child abuse material and started proactively chasing it down.
This is an incredibly distressing investigation, and the information we are going to provide today is particularly confronting.
There'd been no complaints and no red flags.
That's a fucking lie. Because it has since come out that someone complained last year or the year before, and that it was posted onto Facebook, and that the post was hidden, and that there's a whole bunch of other shit.
Brown was not known to police prior to this investigation. However, as soon as we identified his alleged offending, he was removed from the community.
He's since been charged with more than 70 offences, including multiple counts of...
And they fucking skip over this in the news too. Penetration of a child under 12. As attempted under a 12. Essay of a child under 16. Activity in the presence of a child under 16. Keep in mind, these are all the things that they can prove because they found the images and videos on his electronics, allegedly. Use of carriage service to transmit material to others. possession of child abuse material for use through a carriage service. And then they fucking skipped over the last one. Recklessly contaminating goods to cause alarm or anxiety. That's the cutesy way of saying he spread some sort of genetic material around the centres.
Sexual penetration of a child, sexual assault of a child, and producing and transmitting child abuse material.
Last week, we notified 8 families that we had charged Brown.
I was going to trust this fucker in my house to babysit my daughter.
With sexually offending against their children. As you could imagine, this was deeply distressing for the families to hear.
The youngest of the alleged victims, just 5 months old. Sally's little boy is at the same childcare.
I'm so mad. That's why I picked him up. I picked him up early.
She remembers Joshua Brown clearly.
You come in the morning, you drop your child, and he's just smiling at you. And then, like that smile is stuck on my mind now.
The specific charges relate to the Creative Garden Early Learning Centre in Point Cook in 2022 and 2023.
Scarlett had been there from 2019 through to 2024 when she started school. He was one of her favourite educators.
But police are now contacting Joshua Brown's 19 other workplaces since 2017, 3 more in Point Cook, Nino Early Learning Adventures, Explorers Early Learning and Greenwood, 3 also in Werribee, Nido Early Learning School, Little Blossoms Childcare and Milestones Early Learning, 2 in Hoppers Crossing, Milestones Early Learning and Papilio Early Learning. Other sites, Adventurers Education in Wyndham Vale, Williamstown's Only About Children, Wallaby Childcare in Sanctuary Lakes, World of Learning in Leopold, the DOTS Occupational Therapy for Children in Footscray, Aussie Kindies Early Learning in Sunbury and Keilor, and Kids Academy in Melton and in Kensington, Essendon's Papilio Early Learning and a Milestones Early Learning in Bundoora.
Missy Sparkles, to be perfectly frank, no, they haven't yet. I've put in some calls, but that isn't of any sort of reassurance to me because, as I said, they contacted the family of the 8 kids that they were able to identify from the material, is my understanding. I may never know if he actually did anything to her. I may never know if there are naked photos of my daughter circulating on the dark web. Because, as I said, these are just the charges that they were able to bring based on the material that they were able to identify the kids. They've been working to identify the kids since the 12th of May. It's now the 1st of July. Over a month and a half.
We're not suggesting that the accused has offended against children in all these centres, but we're encouraging anyone to come forward with any information to Crime Stoppers.
2,600 alerts have been sent out to...
This is the text message. This is how we found out. I didn't even get it, despite the fact that I was the primary contact at the childcare centre because I was the one that worked closer. It went straight to Lady Overlaw'd. We're reaching out with important information from the Department of Victoria and Victoria Police relating to the investigation of alleged incidents in childcare centres. We understand this may be upsetting and want to assure you that support is available. Please call our dedicated advice line where our team is ready to provide further details and offer assistance. Look, the person that I originally spoke to was very helpful. As soon as he realized exactly why I was calling, where I was calling from, the time period that was applicable, and the fact that she had direct contact with him, he pretty well put me straight through into a waiting queue. And that waiting queue was about 2 hours long. So, despite the fact that both Lady Overlaw'd and I tried calling at various times, it was almost 6 o'clock last night before we were able to speak to anyone that was able to give us any actual advice. And it wasn't until I spoke to the nurse then that they advised what we had to go and get little Lady Overlaw'd tested for. What diseases he may have passed on to her if he offended against her. And because the healthcare system's so fucked up, I tried taking her to the doctor so I can get a referral to go and get the pathology test done today. Got to the doctors, had to use their fucking virtual check-in system. Mind you, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and a pop-up comes up, we're already full of patients, we're not taking anyone else on today, come back tomorrow. So I've managed to book her in for a completely different medical centre where I'm going to go and have to explain all of this shit to a GP in order to get a test so that we can go and get a referral to take the test to see whether or not my little girl may be asymptomatic for gonorrhea, chlamydia, and potentially syphilis. Which, thank God, my mother, who is a nursing practitioner and works with kids, has advised me is extremely unlikely at this point because she's not showing any symptoms. Thank fuck for that. But this is not a situation that I nor anybody else should ever have to be in.
Parents possibly impacted. Giselle Vargas got one.
Like the Victoria Police, saying that the childcare where my son was enrolled was something happened with a sexual assault. And yeah, obviously I'm in panic.
Her 3-year-old son is at the Essendon site where police stopped by this morning to check in. For 1,200 children, their note includes a gut-wrenching health instruction.
As a precaution, we are recommending that some children undergo testing for infectious diseases due to a potential exposure risk.
This is the one thing that has pissed me off. There was a 35-minute press conference with Victoria Police, the Department of Health, and even in the email that they sent out, it was very clear to me, in my own personal opinion, so I don't get sued for defamation here, that they were doing their best to minimize the situation. I think that they probably should have at least, rather than sending a blanket email and text message out to every centre, maybe the ones where there's actually a record of him engaging in certain activities, maybe tailor the information slightly for those families. The ones that were in direct contact during the time of the alleged offending. Maybe, just maybe say, hey, by the way, we have a video that was taken around this time. Your daughter was in the vicinity. It might be a good idea to go and get tested. Rather than saying, oh, it's completely precautionary. We don't want anyone to stress out. We don't want everyone to freak out. Thank you, but as I said, ads are off. I'm not. Please don't send stuff like that through. I don't want super chats on this, please. Like, I really appreciate people, I do, but this is not the stream for it.
In that period.
A dedicated screening and support hotline has been set up, and authorities are promising quick action on tests and results.
We will take every action within our power to keep Victorian children safe.
Oh, bull fucking
Okay, Heidi
shit.
Murphy joins us now at the desk. Heidi, how unusual is it that so much information has been made public in a case like this?
Look, Alicia, incredibly rare. Police tell me, given how vulnerable some of these children are, unable to communicate about what might be happening to them, they made the unique call. Police felt it was that important that any parent with a child in childcare could know who the alleged offender is and where he had worked. If you haven't been contacted, authorities say it is highly unlikely that your child has been impacted. As for Joshua Brown, he remains in police custody. He is yet to enter a plea. And Alicia, Tom, he will be back in court in September.
September 15th. And you better fucking believe that unless they seal that case, I'm going to be sitting front row centre.
All right, Heidi, thank you. The government says there will be an investigation into whether childcare centres followed their own guidelines in the wake of these shocking allegations.
And psychologists have advice for parents concerned about their children's safety in care. More from Brett McLeod.
Did the childcare centres do all they could have? That's the question the Minister for Children wants answered.
The answer on that is a very big fucking no. That's just the long and the short of it. The answer on that is no. I mean, we'd personally had some issues with that particular centre, with the way that management had handled certain things. On one occasion, there was a lack of supervision. Scarlett tripped over and she broke her front tooth. We were pretty pissed off about that. But in our circumstances, we didn't have a lot of options, so we kept her in the centre. And now it's coming out that people have made allegations in years previously. And my understanding is that another staff member may or may not have seen something at one point and reported it, and nothing ever coming of it. My understanding is that there's already another parent who happens to work for Shine Lawyers is pretty fucking pissed off and that they're already talking class action. Lady Overlaw'd and I have already reached out and said, we are 100% behind that. If you need any help, please let us know. No, this was a private childcare centre.
We will apply the necessary scrutiny to establish whether there was anything that could have been done differently or if not.
After the revelation, the accused man passed a working with children check. The government says there will be changes to childcare rules.
A working with children check, although is it a requirement, is it just a piece of paper? It's a 2-hour course and it's ridiculously easy to get. No one should ever feel as if their child is any safer because someone has a working with children check. Is my personal opinion.
That should lead then to any changes to regulations and working with children's checks.
I will bring legislation to the federal parliament in the next few months.
Oh, here we go. Here comes the political posturing to say, oh, well, we're going to make the government's going to come in and make things so much better. You had your fucking chance. And as far as I'm concerned, if I failed as a parent, you failed as a fucking administrator. You can't come along and slap a band-aid on it and say, oh, here's some legislation to make it more difficult. That should have already been in fucking place. If there are changes that can be made, they should have already been made. These kids should never have been in any danger. There should have been checks. There should have been security cameras in the goddamn centres like there's supposed to be.
To cut off funding to childcare centres that aren't up to scratch.
Victoria may follow the lead of New South Wales, which last week announced security cameras will be installed inside childcare centres, including in play areas and sleep rooms. The footage to be uploaded to the regulatory authority. Child protection expert Professor Daryl Higgins says the layout of childcare centres should be more open in every way.
We need to make sure that our centres are built in a way that we have better line of sight so that staff can observe each other. But more importantly, how do we actually change the culture? How do we get adults speaking up when they see other adults who are failing to comply with a code of conduct?
Psychologists say parents should talk to their children if they're acting out of character. So what should parents...
And that's the bit that's eating me up. Because now I know other parents that I've spoken to are sitting here second guessing every instance. Every time she came home with a rash on her bum, or a little bit of nappy rash on the front, or every time that she came home complaining that, oh, her stomach hurt, or did I miss something? Did I ignore something? Did I...
Parents look out for? Well, the National Office of Child Safety says behaviours might include avoidance of familiar places, unusual emotional outbursts, things like bedwetting, nightmares, anxiety, also developmental delays or regression. And of course, there are many reasons children could exhibit these behaviours, which aren't sinister. But psychologist Tim Watson-Munro says concerned parents should have a conversation with their children.
If you feel that people are not acting in the right way, if you don't feel good about it in your stomach, come and talk to us. You won't get into trouble.
Make sure that parents can, with confidence, ensure that their children are going to have great learning opportunities, but more importantly, in a safe environment.
Brett McLeod, 9 News.
I mean, I can sit here and go through all the different news articles and that sort of thing, and to be perfectly honest, I was going to sit and read through them and cover over how the different news agencies were covering it and that sort of thing, because I was intrigued to see that the Washington Post were trying to slant it in a certain way, and the BBC sort of ran over a few things, but I think I'll probably just stick with The Guardian, and then I might have to call it a day. Melbourne childcare worker charged with sexual offences as 1,200 children to be tested for infectious diseases. Victorian health authorities are recommending that 1,200 children are tested for infectious diseases after a Melbourne childcare worker was charged with allegedly sexually abusing infants and children in his care. You know what? YouTube, feel free to strike me. I don't care. I'm going to use the proper language on this. Police on Tuesday confirmed that a Point Cook resident, Joshua Brown, 26, has been charged in May with more than 70 offences related to 8 alleged victims between the ages of 5 months and 2 years old. As I said, the fact that it says 2 years old does not bring me any comfort, because she was there from 2019 through till 2024, and for the period that he was there, she was between 2.5 and 3.5. So, I mean, it gives me some slight solace, but the point is that the 5-month to 2-year-old age range is based on who they've been able to identify from the material, is my understanding. There is nothing to say that there weren't other instances that, in my opinion, there are probably more victims. And as I said, I may never know. The infants and children attended a childcare centre in Melbourne's western suburbs, which The Guardian has chose not to name. Fuck off. It was Creative Garden Point Cook. And their families were notified last week of the alleged offending. The charges include sexual penetration of a child under 12, attempted sexual penetration of a child under 12, sexual assault of a child under 16, and producing child material through use of a carriage service. Notice how they left out the one where he spread shit around that may have infected kids? Police said a significant investigation had taken place since Brown's arrest, led by detectives from the Sexual Crimes Squad. Again, they're trying to downplay it. Said a significant investigation had taken place. The investigation's still ongoing. Which again, to me, says that there's more instances, there's more incidents, and there's more victims. They said that detectives established that Brown had worked at 20 childcare centres between January 2017 and May 2025. They allege there is evidence of offending at a second childcare centre in the northern suburbs, which is being investigated as a priority. A website listing the centres and the known employment dates of Brown has been set up by the government, as well as a dedicated hotline for affected families. Families whose children attended centres during his employment are being contacted to ensure appropriate support and welfare services are provided. Some will be eligible for a payment of up to $5,000 to help with alternative care arrangements, loss of earnings, and other practical needs. Victoria's Chief Health Officer, Dr. Christian McGrath, said about 2,600 families have been contacted by authorities so far, with 1,200 children recommended for screening for infectious diseases. This is another distressing element to this situation that we're taking this approach as a precaution. We do believe that it's low risk, but we want to offer this to provide assurance to... How the fuck... It's low risk for the kids that were not around when he was spreading shit around, okay? That's what I mean by they're completely downplaying this. Sure, there were 30 kids at the centre thereabouts. Somewhere between 30 and 100, maybe, depending. I can't remember how many were in each room. So yeah, sure. For 1,100 or so kids, it might be low risk. But for the kids that were around when he actively committed the act, that's not fucking low risk! We do believe it's low risk. McGrath refused to reveal what diseases the children may have been exposed to. Gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis are the three that we were told. Said infections could be treated with antibiotics, and there is no broader public health risk. An acting police commander said the alleged assaults had been uncovered after the discovery of child abuse material. It was a proactive investigation. It wasn't through someone's complaint. We didn't have an alleged victim for quite some time. Stevenson said that Brown had not been known to police before the investigation. He had a valid working with children check, which has since been cancelled. She said police had taken the unusual decision to lift the suppression order on Brown's identity to ensure every parent out there that has a child in childcare know where he worked, and know who he is and where he worked. And that is a terrifying thought to me. Because I'm willing to bet if the infectious diseases wasn't an issue, we wouldn't have been told. We wouldn't even know about any of this until it hit the news about him being arrested. And then Melody and I would have to sit there and work out the timeline ourselves and see whether or not she... Yeah, Kathy, Mel and I have been discussing it. We're probably going to get a HIV test as well. Just in case. I'd rather know that she has a clean bill of health. Honestly. Police said that at this stage it was believed all alleged offending occurred within Victoria. They said that there was no evidence at this time to suggest any other staff member at the centre was involved. Victoria Premier Jacinta Allen, who could sit on a rusty nail and rotate, said she was sickened by the shocking and distressing allegations. My heart just breaks for the families who are living every parent's worst nightmare. Allen said her government had conducted a review of working with children's checks with changes to be introduced next month to strengthen screening. So why the fuck was that not the case in the first place? Literally society's most vulnerable. If there is anything that could be put in place to protect kids more, it should already be in place. She said she would be guided by police and early childhood regulators investigating the case, but was willing to take every action within their power to keep Victorian children safe. Minister for Children Lizzie Blanthorne said stronger mandatory child safety measures have been signed off at a meeting of state, territory and federal education ministers, but she believes some reform was moving too slow. Blandthorne said that she would like to see a national system of registration for childcare workers fast-tracked and that Victoria would implement its own regardless. Opposition leader Brad Batten said the coalition was ready to work with the government to pass legislation to ensure the strongest possible safeguards are in place. Too fucking little, too fucking late. The Federal Education Minister, Jason Clare, said that he'd spoken to Blandthorne and the question of childcare safety had been top of the agenda when education ministers met on Friday. It's one of the reasons that we've banned the use of personal mobile phones in childcare centres. It's one of the reasons we've made mandatory reporting of physical and sexual assaults in childcare centres a requirement within 24 hours rather than 7 days. Clare said that he would bring legislation to Parliament in the next few months to cut off funding to childcare centres that didn't reach required standards. Brown was remanded and has remained in custody since his arrest on 12 May. He will appear at Melbourne Magistrates Court on 15th of September. Now, you know what? Let's do the Age article. I've still got to go through all the stuff, but the Age is significantly more in depth. Because, in my personal opinion, I do feel like The Guardian tried to rush it out there fairly quickly and cover over shit and buried shit, in my own personal opinion. I'll try not to... I'll try. You know what? Fuck it. It doesn't matter. Holy shit. Thank you to the 400 odd of you watching across YouTube and X. Plans are underway to test 1,200 children for sexually transmitted infections after a Victorian childcare worker was charged with 70 acts against 8 kids in his care, including child rape. Joshua Dale Brown, a 26-year-old Point Cook man who worked in 20 centres in Melbourne suburbs and Geelong over the past 8 years, is accused of abusing children between the ages of 5 months and 2 years at Creative Garden Early Learning in Point Cook between April 22 and January of 2023. Thousands of families were left distraught after being contacted by the health department on Tuesday as police investigated potential further offending by Brown at a centre in Essendon. 2 giant national private sector childcare chains, Affinity Education and G8 Education, who operate multiple centres where the man accused worked, defended their hiring practices, saying that they had followed the required security protocols. The case is also a fresh blow for the embattled childcare sector after the child abuse scandals in Sydney and Brisbane, devastating stories of abuse and neglect for in-profit centres around the country, corporate collapses and accusations of financial misconduct. Why the fuck does any of that matter? Why muddy the waters about the fact that kids were hurt with whether or not the companies were in financial straits? It's absolutely fucking disgusting. Can we just focus on the topic at hand? The Victorian government's already reviewing the state's working with children check system and has now ordered the early childhood regulator to investigate the conduct of childcare operators for whom Brown worked. This is a completely different article to the one that I got yesterday. They've updated this to make the government look good. Both the federal government and the opposition expressed shock at the news on Tuesday and called for action to reform the childcare sector. The state's police force and health and education departments set up a coordinated response before publicly announcing Brown's arrest and his alleged offences on Tuesday, 7 weeks after he was detained. 7 weeks they've fucking known about this shit. But by noon on Tuesday, parents were reporting long delays on hold on a dedicated support line set up by the health department, with a parent of one child at the Point Cook Centre reporting he had to wait more than an hour and a half. Lady Overlaw'd was told it would be a 2-hour wait. There were angry scenes on Tuesday outside some of the centres where Brown worked, with a Point Cook mother, Sally, whose surname the Age has decided not to use, saying she was horrified when she received the email that morning notifying her of the case. The mother went to Creative Garden this morning to collect her son after receiving the email. I was mad. I was so angry. Yeah, no shit. Sally said that she was familiar with the alleged abuser when he worked at the centre, and that the news of his arrest and charges left her feeling frightened and guilty. Now I'm blaming myself that maybe I shouldn't work, she said. What can you do because you think it's the safest place to drop them, but no, it's not. Brown worked at 20 childcare centres between January 2017 and May of 2025, including in some of Melbourne's west and northwest suburbs, Geelong and Bundoora in the city's northeast. He faces charges including sexually penetrating a child under the age of 12, attempting to sexually penetrate a child under 12, sexually assaulting a child under 12, production of child abuse material, and transmitting child abuse material. Why have they have still left out the fact that he spread material around that has caused kids to be infected with diseases? The proactive investigation was triggered by the alleged discovery of child abuse material allegedly in his possession, which led detectives to Brown's employment. The alleged offender has no criminal record, was not previously known to police, and held a valid Working with Children check, which has since been cancelled. G8 Education, which operates the Creative Garden Centre, said its former employee had been safety vetted in accordance with the required protocols. Aligned with G8 Education's commitment to child safety protection, during the former team member's employment, all required employment and background checks, including Working with Children check, were current in accordance with legal and regulatory requirements. G8 is listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and its price fell about... What? Who gives a flying fuck about their stock price? Affinity Education published a statement saying that it had a zero-tolerance approach to any form of abuse or misconduct involving children. The safety and well-being of every child in our care is and always will be our highest priority. I'll tell you right fucking now. G8 and Affinity, you're both looking at class actions at this point, and I'm more than happy to be part of the spearhead on that. You've already got two parents who are lawyers that are pissed the fuck off about your negligence. And I'm sorry, but guess what? Vicarious liability applies in this situation because it was done while he was on the job in that centre, supposedly. Tell the US viewers that our Melbourne childcare centres are being built faster than homes and apartments, all about private profit, $150 per day. Exactly. Why did they ignore the complaints? Yep, that's my understanding of it, Algernon. A second guy who is not related to the childcare centres was also picked up as a result of this, as a result of the investigation. Sorry, I'm just sitting here looking through chat. Sorry, I've been focused on reading the articles. One of the last daycare centres Brown worked for before his arrest was the Affinity Education operated Paplio Childcare Centre in Essendon in Melbourne's northwest, where detectives arrived mid-morning as part of their investigation into Brown. Parents outside the centre told that they're furious at the handling of the situation, particularly the long waits and the support hotline, the lack of information coming from individual centres. Another parent arriving at the Point Cook Centre on Tuesday removed his child after hearing the news and who did not wish to be named, said he was furious and that he'd received no information from a Creative Garden and described the Working with Children's check as a fucking farce. Another parent whose child no longer attended turned up at the Point Cook Centre because the hotline was unable to take his call. He said his child previously attended during the time Brown worked there, but the centre didn't provide any information. I knew they weren't going to, and that's why I didn't go. That and Lady Overlaw'd said she didn't want me getting arrested. Really the only reason I came straight home. The decision to mass test children at testing centres across the metro area came after Brown tested positive for an STI. According to two police sources who were not authorised to comment. Look at this shit. This is everywhere that he worked. He was off and on at various places. That's it there. And that's allegedly where the offending occurred. A Creative Garden, Point Cook, between the 28th of October and the 2nd of February. Did I get a phone call to let me know about any of this? No! No, I did not. Lady Overlaw'd received a text message and an email. She forwarded the email to me because she had no idea what the fuck they were saying about how we had to go and get our little girl tested for sexually transmitted diseases. No, Kimmy, he was pretty well, during the time at Creative Garden, he was pretty well there on rosters. It's just that he was doing different days at different centres. I don't understand. What am I going to do about it? I have yet to decide. I have several avenues. One of the benefits of owning my own law firm, if I want to launch my own action, I don't have to worry about the costs. I don't have to worry about source funding. I'm more than happy to take this, but the simple fact of the matter is another law firm's beat me to the punch, and I'm more than happy to ride on their coattails, frankly. And honestly, the first friend that I spoke to about it yesterday is they wouldn't be surprised if I went Gary Plash on his ass. Lady Overlaw'd's pretty sure that he's not going to make it to his hearing in September. I told her that that was probably wishful thinking because they have to put scum like this into protective custody. But, you know, accidents happen. And I won't feel bad about it if it does. The health department contacted about 2,600 families, parents, and carers by email, text, and letters recommending that about 1,200 children undergo testing for infectious diseases. Families in the wider community can be assured that the infections that the children were potentially exposed to can be treated with antibiotics. There's no broader health risk to the community. I will take that as I will take that with a grain of salt. Honestly. As to what... The letter was sent to affected families on Tuesday, stressing that testing was highly precautionary. Records indicate your child was enrolled at one of these centres during the time that he was working there. At this stage, there's no evidence to suggest that your child has been offended against. And again, I take absolutely no fucking solace in that sentence. And frankly, I get that you were trying to placate I get that you were trying to placate the families of 1,200 kids. I still don't think that particular sentence should be in there because I genuinely, in my own personal opinion, believe that that's misleading. You're right. There is no evidence to say that any other kids have been offended against because the only evidence they had that kids have been offended against is the material that he had on his electronics, is my understanding. We will never know unless he gives a full confession. We will never know. And you know what? I don't think I can speak for all 1,200 families, but I think there's at least a handful of the families at Creative Garden that I can say, this gives us no fucking solace. These kids were so young that by the grace of God, hopefully they will never remember. Thankfully, Scarlett said that she doesn't. And I am hoping and praying that's because nothing ever happened. But in the back of my mind, short of him giving a full confession, I'm never going to know. In the back of my mind, I'm always going to think, was this sick fuck looking at her in that way? Are there photos on the dark web of my daughter? Because just because the material that they found is for these specific 8 kids who were all at the centre at the same time that she was, who were all under her care at the same time that she was, you can understand why. Why? Excuse me, I'm getting a little bit over emotional than I intended. The seriousness of the situation was underscored by senior officials who lined up at Tuesday morning's announcement at police headquarters in the CBD. Jacinta Allen, don't give a fuck. Flanked by ministers for police and children, don't give a fuck. The acting chief police and the chief health officer. Allen became emotional as she said she was sickened by the allegations of abuse as the government pledged to do all it could to support the children and the families affected by this case. The system has failed these families. Here we are finding ourselves yet again talking about tragedies affecting potentially thousands of children. These are risks that have been known about for a long time. We acknowledge the deep distress this has caused to our dedicated early childhood educators and carers, professionals who work every day to nurture and protect our children. The government must urgently review Australia's child safety safeguards, including those under the National Quality Framework, to identify where any strengthening of legislation practices could occur. Political fucking doublespeak. But, at least it made it to CBS News. That 1,200 families have been urged by police in Australia to have their children tested for infectious diseases after a child care worker in Melbourne was charged with multiple sexual assault offences against 8 children. Joshua Brown was charged with more than 70 offences, including child rape and attempted rape, possession of child material, and possession of a child material. It doesn't matter. The Victorian police said in a statement on Tuesday, the most important thing for investigators was that we needed to identify the victims involved. These are some of the most vulnerable members of our community, and the conversations police have had to have with their families were no doubt life-changing in the worst possible way. Charges relate to 8 victims from one childcare centre in the Melbourne suburb of Point Cook between April of 22 and January of 2023. But authorities fear more children may have been affected. Brown worked at more than 20 childcare centres in the region between 2017 and his arrest in May of 2025, according to police. Detectives are investigating as a priority evidence of possible further offending during his time at another childcare centre in the Melbourne suburb of Essendon. In total, some 2,600 families whose children attended the 2 institutions during Brown's employment have been contacted, with authorities recommending 1,200 children be tested for certain diseases due to the manner of the alleged offending. Police said that they believe Brown acted alone and only within the state of Victoria. He had a valid working with children in the state and was not known to police prior to his arrest in May, after detectives discovered that he had child abuse material. And I was just for the fuck of it, because I was curious, I wanted to see how the Washington Post covered this, because in the past they've been a little bit more sympathetic to these kinds of people, in my personal opinion. Yes, Stephanie, that's how all this came about. Lady Overlaw'd and I received a text message and an email stating that we had to go and get our 6-year-old daughter tested. Tests urged for 1,200 children after daycare workers charged with assault. Authorities in Australia have recommended that about 1,200 young children undergo health screenings after a man who worked at childcare centres in Victoria was charged with more than 70 offences, including sexual assault. Joshua Brown, a 26-year-old from Point Cook in southwest Melbourne, was charged on May 12 with more than 70 offences, including sexual assault, sexual activity in the presence of a child, and possessing and producing child abuse material. Charges relate to eight victims ranging in age from 5 months to 2 years who were placed at the Point Cook Childcare Centre between April 22 and January of 2023. The centre has been identified as Creative Gardens Early Learning Centre by Victorian authorities. 20 childcare centres where Brown worked between January of 2017 and 2025, including some for as little as a day, have been named so parents can check whether they may have been at the facilities during that time. The acting commander, Janet Stevenson, said at a news conference on Tuesday that Brown was charged after a search warrant was carried out at his home. She said Brown was not known to police during the investigation and had passed background checks to work with children. He was a childcare worker at the time of his arrest, she said, adding that he was providing a temporary fill-in care in some cases and may have held other roles throughout his employment. Stevenson, in the police statement, described the investigation as incredibly distressing and confronting. The most important thing for our investigators was that we needed to identify the victims involved. And again, my understanding is that not all victims have been identified. I may be wrong on that. I don't know. Because they're not providing us with any fucking information. These are some of the most vulnerable members of the community, and the conversations police have had to have with their families were no doubt life-changing in the worst possible way. I'm not going to go back over what McGrath said. McGrath declined to comment on the nature of the infectious diseases and whether any of the victims or the accused had tested positive, citing private health information and the sensitive nature of the investigation. We do understand that this is another distressing element to this situation. Families in the wider community can be assured that the decisions... At this stage, there's no evidence to suggest that other staff members at any of the centres were involved or that any other alleged offences have taken place outside of Victoria, police said in a statement. However, detectives are examining an allegation at a childcare centre in Essendon that is being investigated as a priority. Interesting. Yeah. It wasn't until Lady Overlaw'd and I basically had to sit on hold for almost 2 hours before we were able to speak to someone. The original person that I spoke to on the phone was unable to identify the information because he wasn't a healthcare practitioner. And they didn't tell us in the emails what sexually transmitted diseases our child may have been exposed to. We had to wait for 2 hours on a health line to eventually speak to a nurse who was quite lovely. But it's the fact that they are refusing to say... it's the fact that they're refusing to tell the public what these kids may have been exposed to. $1,200 kids between the ages of as young as a month right up until 4 years old. And you know what? Like I said, I get it. I understand that for the majority of those kids, it's precautionary testing. But he has been charged with recklessly and deliberately attempting to spread shit. Which in my mind could mean any number of things. Maybe he ejaculated into the sunscreen and got off on the fact that the kids were putting it on their skin. Maybe he spat in their food. I don't fucking know because they're not providing any fucking information. And I get that the testing might be precautionary for the majority of those 1,200 kids. But the ones that were actually in the facility at the time when he did that offending, I don't see that as precautionary. I see that as extraordinarily time sensitive. Can I go speak to the local police? I mean, I probably could, but I wouldn't expect to receive any information. Are those the worst charges? I mean, I have yet to see the charging sheet. No, well, they told me specifically on the phone what she needs to be tested for. I personally am going to be... I'm going to be asking the doctor what they think additional tests should be done. But why the fuck am I hesitating? It doesn't matter. I've been told that my 6-year-old daughter needs to be tested as to whether or not she may have contracted gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis from this fucker. And again, it's got me sitting back and thinking, because, yeah, sure, she may be asymptomatic, but now I'm sitting back and thinking, over the last 2, 3, 4 years, when she was directly in contact with this fucker, did I ignore anything? Did I overlook something? Was it really a rash that was just nappy rash? Was it really... So... yeah, I genuinely don't believe that the act that they charged him with is appropriate. Nothing, Shaz, and honestly, I wasn't... This was more about me venting than anything else. Honestly. Because This is just something we're going to have to live with. I am praying to God that every one of those tests comes back negative, because although in my mind I'll still be sitting there going, I'll never know, if any one of those tests come back positive, it's pretty much a guaranteed answer for me as to whether or not anything ever actually happened to her. I mean, I may have to spend the rest of my life worried about whether or not there are naked photos of my daughter when she was anywhere between the age of 2 and 4 circulating on the internet. But I think eventually I could live with that. If any of the tests come back positive, then, you know, come September, there may be an additional headline that will give LordTube plenty of, plenty of stuff to cover. Fenning's good, no true jury of your peers would convict you. Child porn on top of that. This is what the death penalty's for. Stephanie, that's the only reason they caught him. That's the only reason that any of this has come to light. They found material on his phone and he got caught up in a child porn sting, from my understanding. That's the only reason we know any of this. So... hello to everyone from Shizzy. Good to see you. Sorry for the fact that you're all coming in on this particular stream. One sec, I just gotta... You'll go catch up when I'm finished. Well, to be perfectly honest, Jill, I'm probably not far off. I don't know that I've got it in me to keep talking about this. When's the mass lead feeding start? Asking for spectators on the sidelines. Yeah, and I think that's really just what I'm going to do, is that I'm going to hope and pray that everything comes back negative and that I don't have to... that we can just forget this ever happened, honestly. Say all the words, don't do the actions. Your daughter needs you to show you what a real man is and how to behave. Well, like I said, this is not a set of conversations that I ever thought that I'd have to have with my child. No parent should have to have this particular conversation with their child. Sure, there's great ventilation contractors in your area. I'm hoping and praying that it won't come to it. So, for those of you just coming in, let me summarize it for you. "26-year-old gay child worker," not that it really matters that he's gay, just saying. And that's her at the door. 1 second, sweetie. What's up? Okay. You want a hug? Come here then. We're talking about all this stuff we talked about yesterday. Okay. Love you. What's wrong? You want me to come out and play? Yeah. That's sort of why we decided it'd be a good idea to speak to her about it, Sparkles. She's old enough that the kids are... because there's going to be more than a few kids at your school that will have gone to daycare, isn't there?
What?
Well, do you know if any of the other kids at your school went to your daycare?
No, none of them.
Oh, okay. Well,
Because I never seen any of them.
but you've never actually asked any of the kids whether or not they went to the same daycare, have you?
No, one time.
Oh, really?
One time was only a couple of kids, not the whole class. Maybe some bigger kids, like someone else could have gone to the daycare. Maybe found like
Okay, well, let's not say too much about your classes. We don't want to give away where you go to school. Okay.
like none of them went to my daycare. I can't believe that Josh would do such a thing.
I don't think anyone believes it. I don't think anyone can understand how or why he did it, sweetheart.
It hurts my heart.
Oh, sweet.
It does, because I thought he was a very nice guy. But actually, he was a mean prisoner guy. That did such a harsh thing to everyone in the world.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
Because now parents are getting worried that the kids The kids are getting scared now in their heart. They're like fear. No, because I know he wouldn't do such a thing to me. But he would. But he didn't. I know that. Unless I was a baby.
That's what Mum and Daddy worry about. Someone just sent me $10 to say in case I get in jail for going and hurting Josh.
Whoever just sent that, whoever just sent that,
Yeah.
just say, good luck, but that is not.
You don't reckon Daddy will get caught?
That is not. You're not hurting anybody.
Atta girl.
You're not hurting anybody. He's still my friend, right?
No, he's not. He's absolutely not your friend, sweetheart.
Well, at least I care about him. Well, I used to.
Play Minecraft? Yeah, I'll come.
Can we do a
Realistic world? Do we have to? It kind of looks really weird. Okay, we can play the realistic world. The black house is mine, is it?
Because
Okay, alright, go on. I'll finish up the stream and then I'll come out. Okay. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. We have plenty of time to play Minecraft. Okay. Alright, well, as you heard, I've been summoned to play Minecraft, so I will I'll catch us all later. Thank you, Shizzy, for the raid, and thank you to everyone that sent super chats and maybe not dropping memberships. Thank you. Appreciate that too. Didn't really think this would be a stream that I came back for, but I kind of needed to get all that off of my chest. I still feel like I'm going to be yelling and ranting and raving and all that sort of stuff. I probably won't be doing that on camera, but I'll try and be back soon.